Verily, I say unto you, the era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard. The time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt, Ted Derea, the time of end. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with the new sun. It will be reborn of elder blood, of hen Iker, of the seed that has been sown, a seed which will not sprout but burst into flame, Esthrathesa. Thus it shall be. Watch for the signs. What signs these shall be, I say unto you. First the earth will flow with the blood of Enshe, the blood of elves. Thus reads the prophecy of the elven sage Ithlina Egli Epivenian, an oracle that not only foretells the prophetic doom of a distant future, but also echoes the brutal realities of the present. Welcome to our two-part miniseries on the world of The Witcher. In this episode, we will explore the history of the continent, beginning with the origins of its eldest races, leading into the arrival of humankind and the formation of Nilfgaard and the Northern Kingdoms, before finally ending with the beginning of the Northern Wars, the calamitous clash of civilizations which bookends the grand epics of Sapkowski's novels. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel. Chapter 1. Search back through your memories to the past, to the days of Desmod, Radovid and Sambuk, to the days of Abrad the Old Oak. You may not remember them because your lives are so very short, you're like mayflies. But I remember, and I'll tell you what it was like in these lands just after you climbed from your boats on the Yaruga estuary and the Ponta Delta onto the beach. Sheldon Skaggs, Dwarven Veteran, Blood of Elves, Chapter 1. Deep in the mists of prehistory, the continent was covered in the primordial wilderness and sparsely inhabited by various different indigenous sentient species, such as the furry, marmot-like werebubs, the reptilian vrans, the fey-like dryads, and the crafty gnomes. The first colonists to arrive on its shores were the dwarves, who settled peacefully into the continent's mountains, where they developed a symbiotic partnership with the gnomes. The two races bonded over a shared love for industry and fine craftsmanship, and remain strong allies to this day. Centuries later, although still thousands of years before the present, ethereal white ships appeared on the horizon of the Western Sea. Those who piloted them were the Enshe, or in common tongue, elves. Unlike the dwarves, their arrival was not without conflict, and they feuded intermittently with the species who preceded them. Before long, magnificent elven palaces could be seen from the Alba River to the Blue Mountains, while their sorcerer seers, the Ensheven, reigned as the most powerful mages in the world. Approximately 1,500 years ago, the world was racked by an interdimensional cataclysm known as the Conjunction of the Spheres, causing all manner of alien monsters to be flung from their own reality and into the world of the continent, where they carved bloody ecological niches in the new world they'd been tossed into. However, out of all of these new species, the most successful by far would be a relatively diminutive creature that stood on two legs. Indeed, it was through the Conjunction of the Spheres that the human race arrived upon the continent for the first time. The settlement probably began in the far south, where the human tribes that arrived along the Alba River eventually came across the Black Shay, a subculture of the Enshe. The two species eventually mixed and became one, resulting in a predominantly human people with a culture, language and bloodline which linked them to their elven predecessors. Around 1,000 years after the conjunction, and 500 years from the present, a new group of humans arrived at the mouth of the Yaruga and the Ponta Delta in an event known as the Landing of the Exiles. Where these exiles came from is a mystery, but they expanded faster and more violently across the continent than any of the humans who had come before them. Immediately, the Nordlings, as they came to be known, began conquering all the other sentient species between the Dragon Mountains and the Marindel River. The Vrans and Werebubs were hunted to near extinction, while the Dryads were forced to shelter amidst the impassable primordial forests of Brokilon. The dwarves and gnomes likewise retreated into their underground sanctuaries deep in the Macaham Mountains, weathering the human onslaught like one weathers a plague. The Elves, meanwhile, chose to withdraw instead of fight. Abandoning their palaces, they retreated further and further east, hoping that the human hunger for new land would eventually just stop. Of course, it didn't, and when the Elves finally resolved to push back against the Nordling tide, it was too late. The Enshe were skilled warriors, but they were critically outmatched in one crucial area, their loins. Unable to reproduce nearly as efficiently as humans do, they were overwhelmed by the sheer force of numbers, and after being pushed to the very furthest edge of the continent, were forced to surrender. Avalach said nothing for a moment. "Share?" he finally drawled. "With you? Knowledge, my dear, is a privilege, and privileges are only shared with one's equals. And why would I, an elf, a sage, a member of the elite, share anything with a descendant of a creature that appeared in the universe barely 5 million years ago, having evolved from an ape, a rat, a jackal, or some other such mammal? A creature that took around 1 million years to discover that one can execute some sort of operation with a gnawed bone using its 2 hairy hands? After which it shoved the bone up its rectum and shrieked for joy?" Tower of Swallows, Chapter 7. As peace reigned for a time between man and elf, relations improved, and the fair folk taught much to the young human race. The conjunction of the spheres had left vast fonts of raw chaos in the world, and Enshe mages showed humans how to channel it. Thus, the first human magicians were created. It would not take long for the wizards of the north to band together under a single organization, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. Before long, this brotherhood had grown so influential as to be able to pull the strings of even the most powerful kings. For indeed, as the Nordlings had conquered their way through the continent, many states had formed in their wake. As a common Dwarven witticism goes, when the exiles had first arrived at the mouth of the Yaruga, 3 kingdoms sprang out of every 4 boats. But eventually, smaller states were absorbed into larger ones, resulting in the north being dominated by 4 main kingdoms: Temeria, Redania, Kedwen, and Aedirn. Although the smaller kingdoms of Sidaris, Kerek, Verdun, Brugge, Cintra, Sodden, Lyria and Rivia, Kovir, Povis, Skellige, and the Hengfors League all managed to secure political niches for themselves. As humanity built their settlements across the continent, they found their expansion contested by various post-conjunction chaos creatures, such as wraiths, werewolves, griffins, and strigae. Thus it was that the Witcher caste was born, mutant superhumans created by mages, imbued with heightened senses and natural resistances which made them ideal for monster slaying. As a result, monsters were driven into the fringes of human-inhabited territory, allowing humans to become the apex predators of the continent. Soon after, the Nordlings broke their peace with the Elves. In a famous incident, one Marshal Milan Ralpanek of the Redanian army would treacherously massacre the entire Elvish population of Loch Muin, igniting another war between humans and Enshe, which would only end when the last elven enclave, Dol Blathanna, was annexed by Aedirn 3 centuries later. By now, most of the elder races, known to the Nordlings as non-humans, had assimilated into human society. The Dwarves found the most success in this, flourishing as merchants and bankers in Nordling cities. Nevertheless, they, like all non-human species who lived among men, were subject to regular persecutions and racially motivated violence. It is here that we should divert our attention away from the north, for as the Nordling kings were building their royal keeps atop the ruins of elven cities, in the south the Black Sun was on the rise. "You've travelled a long way," repeated Emir Va Amrais, Daithwen Adan Ir Khan Ep Movud, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies, removing his helmet. "I'm not sure," Geralt calmly replied, "if you haven't travelled further, Dunny." The Lady of the Lake, Chapter 9. The Empire of Nilfgaard had relatively humble beginnings. Beginning as a smallish city-state situated on the estuary of the River Alba, the human descendants of the Black Shay slowly began expanding. Neighbouring states in places like Vicovaro, Rowan, Etolia, Gameria, Meikt, Erbin, Gesso, Metina and Nazaire were slowly brought into the fold and introduced to the Nilfgaardian culture and language, which was a dialect of Elven Elder speech. Around 40 years before the present, the empire was racked by civil turmoil when the reigning emperor, Fargus var Amrais, was deposed and murdered by a man that history remembers only as the usurper. To eliminate all other claimants to the throne, the usurper captured Fergus's son, the 13-year-old Emrys, and had his court sorcerer cast a spell on the boy, which twisted his young body into the form of a grotesque humanoid hedgehog. After this, the bestial Emrys was tossed into the wild and left to die. But die he would not, and in fact, it would be this young, unfortunate hedgehog that would change the fate of the world. Escaping beyond the Nilfgaardian border, the cursed emir fled to the Erlenwald forest, where he adopted a new alias, Dunny. There, destiny would embrace him when he stumbled upon the wounded Rognar, king of Cintra, and saved his life. To claim his life debt, Dunny invoked the ancient law of surprise, binding himself to the king's unborn daughter. 15 years passed, and after a series of misadventures involving Cintra's warrior queen Calanthe, resulting in his life being saved by a certain white-haired witcher, Dunny was wed to Pavetta, their bond proving powerful enough to lift his bestial curse, transforming him from urchin back into a man. For a time, Dunny and Pavetta lived peacefully in Cintra, where they had a daughter, Cyrilla. However, soon Dunny was approached by the ambitious northern sorcerer Vilgefortz of Roggeveen, who offered to help restore the prince to his rightful place on the throne of Nilfgaard. Dunny agreed and resolved to return to his homeland, bringing his wife and daughter with him. Pavetta, however, had other plans. She managed to sneak her daughter Cyrilla off the boat meant to take them south before it left port. When Dunny found out about this, he became enraged and, in a scuffle, accidentally threw his wife overboard, causing her to drown at sea. With his family ripped from him, Dunny's heart darkened, and with the help of Vilgefortz, he cruelly hunted down all his political enemies. Eventually, he was able to reclaim the throne of Nilfgaard. Thus, Emir var Emreis was reborn, and after using the gravestones of his enemies to pave his ballroom, he became known by an additional grim moniker, Daithwen Aden Ir Khan Ep Morvad, the White Flame, dancing on the barrows of his enemies. Now, with the endless legions of Nilfgaard at his command, Emir turned his gaze onto Cintra, where his daughter Cyrilla was still being held. Before we stood on that hill, the chapter simply told us, that is what you have to do. Whose war was it? What were we defending there? The land, the borders, the people and their cottages, the interests of kings, the wizards' influence and income, order against chaos? I don't know, but we defended it because that's what had to be done. And if the need arises, I'll stand on the hill again. Triss Merigold, 14th mage to die on Sodden Hill. Blood of Elves, Chapter 3. In the year 1263 of the Nordling calendar, a massive Nilfgaardian army mustered in Nazaire. It is unknown how large this army was, but given the manpower available to Emir, 50,000 men, not including horses and supply wagons, would be considered a conservative estimate. The emperor put his top field marshal, Menno Cohorn, in charge of this expeditionary force. Without delay, Cohorn marched his soldiers towards the Marnadal Stairs, the narrow valley corridor which led through the Amel Mountains, the natural border between Nilfgaard and Cintra. No army that large moves without notice, and before long, word had reached the Cintran capital of the Black Banners cresting over the valley to their south. Queen Calanthe, ever the warrior, did not hesitate to meet iron for iron, and quickly assembled the Cintran royal army and marched to meet Cohorn at the Marnadal Pass. Knowing herself to be outnumbered, Calanthe required allies. Luckily, in the years since her late daughter's betrothal to Dunny turned Emir, the Lioness of Cintra had wed herself to one Aist Tershach, the fierce Jarl of Skellige. In honor of this marriage alliance, 50 Skelligan longships departed from their native isles to reinforce the Cintrans on the mainland. In July, the Nilfgaardians under Cohorn met with the Cintran army, commanded by Queen Calenthe and Jarl Turshach, at the foot of the Manadal Pass, and a battle was quickly joined. The armies threw themselves upon one another like rabid dogs, clashing steel to steel. The fighting continued for nearly an entire day, and although the Cintrans fought bravely, they found themselves direly outnumbered and slowly but surely losing ground. To make matters worse, reinforcements were not arriving. A massive storm off the Cintran coast had prevented the warriors of Skellige from making landfall, stranding Queen Calenthe and her men in the pass with no hope of salvation. With the tide already turning against them, Jarl Turshach was impaled through the eye by an arrow, killing him instantly. After this, Cintran morale broke, and the battle turned into a slaughter. The legions of the Black Sun had annihilated their foes, and the path to the kingdom itself lay wide open. In the chaos, Queen Calenthe, despite being heavily wounded, had managed to rally the few surviving remnants of her levies and retreat back to her capital, where she intended to make a last stand. Cohorn pursued her doggedly, and within a few weeks, black banners could be seen before the city's walls. With no army large enough left to defend them, the capital's outer walls fell quickly, and the black-clad soldiers burst in, subjecting the city to a brutal sack, where men, women and children were cut down indiscriminately. The last remaining Cintran knights retreated to the castle in the upper citadel, but the Nilfgaardians quickly breached that too, forcing the defenders to retreat into the inner keep, which had been protected with a magic barrier. This, however, only delayed the inevitable, for within 4 days, Nilfgaardian mages had ripped through the barrier. Knowing it was over, the nobles of Cintra chose death over slavery. As for Queen Calenthe herself, she leapt headfirst out of the castle tower, as brave and dramatic in death as she had been in life. In the meantime, a Nilfgaardian knight by the name of Cahir Moor Difrinip Kalach waded through the blood-soaked streets of Cintra on a special mission bestowed upon him by Emir to find Cirilla and return her to her father. As luck would have it, Cahir managed to find the young lion cub, but for reasons yet unknown, he went rogue and helped her escape out of the Nilfgaardian army's clutches. Cintra now belonged to Emir, but Cirilla, the very reason behind the whole invasion, remained woefully out of the Emperor's grasp. Despite this, the Emperor ordered his armies to push on. Not content with Cintra alone, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies would not be satisfied until the entire north belonged to him. For his success in battle, Field Marshal Menno Cohorn was awarded the governorship of the new imperial province of Cintra. But governing it would have to wait, for there was still more conquering to do. With Cintra in ashes, the Black Banners moved west to Upper Sodden. There, Cohorn was met with fierce resistance, not just from the Soddeners, but the Sea Dogs of Skellige, led by the young Krachan Kreit, who had sworn eternal bloodshed upon the Nilfgaardians after the death of their beloved Jarl, Ais Turshach. Nevertheless, the Black Ones crushed the army at Sodden as well, and incorporated Upper Sodden south of the Yaruga into the imperial fold. Chaos ensued across the Nordling realms as Nilfgaard's northern advance continued. Seeing a chance to pay back centuries of oppression and bloodshed, and no doubt spurred on by discreet Nilfgaardian propaganda, many elves took advantage of the invasion to abandon northern cities where they had been second-class citizens and disappear into the forests, where they formed guerrilla units that preyed on the vulnerable, merchants, travelers and undefended villagers. Before long, the elves were joined by dwarves, gnomes and even halflings, all of whom had suffered at human hands. These non-human guerrillas became known as the Scoia'tael, meaning squirrels in Elder speech, a tongue-in-cheek reference to how they lived in the forest and ate nuts off the trees. By now, the utter disarray consuming the north had certainly drawn the attention of the region's most powerful kings, Henselt of Kaedwen, Dermowend of Aedirn, Foltest of Temeria and Vizimir of Redania. these four men were not friends, and were more often than not feuding with one another over one border dispute or another. However, the brutal massacre of the Cintrans and the death of Queen Calanthe, a warrior they had all admired, proved to be a unifying force that bound the four monarchs together in a common cause. Thus it was that the rulers of the north joined as one, assembling a massive host and marching south to meet Nilfgaard's legions. Both the Nilfgaardians under Cohorn and the Northern Coalition, united under King Visimir of Redania, beelined it to the Yaruga. Ultimately it would be the Nordlings who forded the Great River first, managing to force the Black Ones to meet them at a place later known as Sodden Hill. There, the two massive hosts formed lines against one another, setting the stage for one of the greatest battles in the continent's history. For all its importance, we know surprisingly little about the Battle of Sodden Hill. Cirilla, during one of her Elder Blood visions, described the battlefield itself as an endless sea of grass stretching out to the horizon. Other small details provided by Sheldon Skaggs, a veteran of the battle, allow us to assume that both sides drew up fairly standard battle lines, with large supply wagon trains at their back. The Northern Army was also a diverse one, waving a colourful panoply of banners from many kingdoms, borne not only by humans but by dwarves as well. For indeed, while many shortfolk had joined the Scoia'tael, many others despised the authoritarianism Nilfgaard represented and were willing to fight alongside their erstwhile Nordling oppressors in the common cause of freedom. The battle itself was long, brutal and bloody, a swamp of steel, arrows and gore. However, the deciding factor of this contest would not be the rank and file dying amongst the blood-soaked grass, but with the wielders of chaos in the hillock above. For indeed, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, that clandestine lodge of wizards and wizardesses who ubiquitously controlled the northern realms in secret, had taken their place on a tall grassy hillock overlooking the battlefield, where they poured every ounce of power they had into fending off the Nilfgaardian advance. 22 magicians would step forth onto the hill at Sodden, and only 9 would ever come down again. Originally, it was thought that 14 northern mages had given their lives in the battle, but Triss Merigold, the 14th on the hill, would later turn up alive. After days of fighting, and over 30,000 dead on both sides, the Nilfgaardian army was finally routed. It was a glorious victory for the Nordlings, but one that came with a heavy heap of foreboding. The mages of the north were heroes, but who had led them onto Sodden Hill other than Vilgefortz, the very same scheming sorcerer who was in league with Emperor Emhyr? Only time would tell what he was planning. In the meantime, Scoia'tael commandos, fueled by their hatred for humanity, continued to ravage the northern countryside, and perhaps worst of all, despite being forced to retreat, Nilfgaard had consolidated its hold on Upper Sodden and Cintra. Moreover, Princess Cirilla, the key to securing the throne of Cintra, had been missing ever since wiggling out of the grip of Cahir. Indeed, the First Northern War may have been over, but the second one was soon to begin. We're going to talk about the Second Northern War next week, and are planning to cover the battles of all major fantasy, sci-fi and alternative history worlds, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing. This goes a long way to help us in the eyes of the almighty algorithm. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to see what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. Your feedback is very important to us. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.